Hi, everybody. We feeling ready to go? Good. Oh, like Kai says, very good morning or very good evening, very good night. Very good, whatever time it is where you are. And I know that every lesson I say, I'm very, very excited to. And then I describe what we're going to be doing, but I am very excited to be moving into accessibility with you today. So, accessibility. Can anybody tell me if you know what accessibility means or what accessibility might mean? So, just go ahead and hit me with your ideas. What is accessibility or what might accessibility mean? See how lazy I am, where I'm like, we're going to be talking about accessibility. I want you to tell me about it. So, while I'm waiting for some of you to tell me what you think accessibility is, oh, good evening from the seashells. I hope it's lovely out there and I hope it's not too late. Before we go into what accessibility is, I wanted to show off a thing. So sometimes, I'll write it out. Sometimes you'll see accessibility written as A11Y. Oh, good. Oh, no, no, it's too early. If you're in Australia, we'll try and do some earlier slots later. Get some sleep, Steve. What are you doing? It must be brutally early. So sometimes you'll see accessibility written as A11Y. Yeah. And this kind of feels like a little bit of an inaccessible way to write accessibility. But there are 11 letters between the A and the Y in accessibility. And that is written as A11Y, just as a cute sort of computer culture abbreviation. It's a weird thing. And accessibility, what we're going to be studying today, I'd argue is the art, the sort of philosophical approach of making your websites and making your web experiences available to users and potential users from a wide range of different usage needs. Oftentimes, when we think of that, it could be a way to say, hey, is this accessible? Is this available to me with my needs? I think that's a really good way to frame it. And oftentimes, and very rightly, we center disabled users when we talk about accessibility. So you hear us talk about users using screen readers. So those might be users who have visual impairments or users who find that an audio version of the web suits them best. We might talk about people using keyboard only navigation. So folks who either can't or folks who prefer not to use a mouse. So, what we're really talking about in accessibility is hey, we always say hey, we're very informal when we talk to our browser, aren't we? So, we say, hey, you're building this website. We want to try and make sure that this website is available to anybody who wants to use it. And oftentimes, when I talk to you all about what we're learning, I'm really excited like, oh, here's a new thing. Here's a skill or a trick that leaves you a little bit more powerful as a developer. And we are going to learn more of those today, but we're also going to learn a lot more about our responsibilities as developers. August, you're making a really good point. I love this. So, August is saying we have to be aware of this, and we have the responsibility to make the web as accessible as we can, both for people who may have disabilities or different needs, but also, and I love this because a lot of people don't stop to frame this, but also think about what we're putting out weight wise. So, not just accessible to folks with different needs, but accessible to folks with different devices or accessible to folks with different connections. The web was genuinely made for everyone, not just people who live someplace fancy with broadband and fiber connections, but genuinely people all over the world. Sorry. So, we're going to, and this is going to be a short session. So, this is session 7 in the boot camp. You're more than halfway done. You're almost mostly done. And this is actually going to be a short session. So today and next week's sessions are going to be a little bit shorter than normal. There's less classwork. And this is to give you a chance to sort of catch up if you need that extra time. Or if you're caught up with your classwork, to go ahead and sneak a little bit of a buffer. So go ahead and study a little bit ahead. The first thing we're going to look at is alt text. Do you remember way back in week 1 or week 2? We did alt text already. And if you remember correctly, I was super mean. I said, oh, you must have alt text for all of your images or else. Kai, I love this. So, really, it allows you, as somebody building a website, to reach more people. But really, as well, we're making sure that those people aren't given blank spots on the web. And I'm really excited because our guest speaker tomorrow is going to be the head of accessibility from booking.com, Parham. And Parham's, oh, there we are. Parham, I always say, oh, he's so smart, but he's absolutely brilliant. It's ridiculous. And he's going to talk to us about what things are like as a screen reader user and as a developer and really show off and answer tons of your questions. August, you got me. Alt text is absolutely to explain what an image is. So let's go ahead and make this a little bit bigger. Here we've got our code. It's an image. We're pretty comfortable with how to do an image in HTML so far. And over here we see our image is broken. So not only is this not good for folks, we don't have the alt text, it's not great for folks with using screen readers or assistive technology, but it's also just not good for people. It's broken. In HTML5, a alt text attribute is mandatory. You must have it. And even though you must have it, it won't break. So if you don't have alt text, it won't break your HTML. But you should have it because it's the right thing to do and you're good people. Yeah, we do stuff that's good for humans because we like humans. So here, this should be a picture of Camper Cat doing karate. It doesn't say anything, but let's think about really good alt text for this. I often see people, and we should ask Parham this question tomorrow about alt text, but I often see people start with saying, oh, it's a picture of, and I mean, somebody using a screen reader gets the information this is an image. We probably don't have to tell them it's a picture. But this is Camper Cat. Oh, is and look, so we're getting that. Even though we're not using the assistive tech, because this image is broken, it's displaying even to your sighted users that the alt text, so letting us know what should be there if we didn't somehow bork it. Doing karate. If we feel like that's an okay. You could put the full stop, you can leave the full stop off. I'm not sure what's better. So that's going to be my question for Parham tomorrow. Oh, yeah. Hi, Catherine. Thank you for joining us. We're going to run these tests and everything's fine. See, even doing just one of these, we're getting 5%, big old chunks as we come through this. And this is going to seem weird because I just told you I was just very threatening where I said, you must have alt text. And you should always have that alt text attribute. But sometimes you want to leave it blank. And you say, well, Jess, that's weird. And I'm like, yeah, but the internet is weird. So by including the alt text attribute, it sort of gives the hint that we didn't forget. We knew this was important. And there are 2 times when you can leave off the alt text. And the way you leave off the alt text is you set the alt text to an empty string. Remember when we were doing animations last week and we set one of the attributes to an empty string? An empty string are just the quotation, an empty string are the quotation marks with nothing in the middle. No space, because a space isn't empty, but an empty string. And that's going to be one of those things that's really valuable to remember as you go along, because that's going to come up again and again in different kinds of programming. And here we're learning that there are 2 different times when we can leave that alt text blank. One of them is when our image has a caption under it, and that caption kind of gives us the same vibe, the same information, that's much more useful, that the alt text would. And we can also leave that off when it's a purely decorative image. So if I just had a little white square that's spaced between paragraphs on my page, I probably don't need alt text for that. If I'm using assistive technology and it's reading my article and then it stops to say, "Oh, hey, here's an image of a white square." I'm like, "Well, I didn't need that. There's not a lot of valuable information there." I'm going to come all the way down. We've set that to a empty string. And we're like 10%. I mean, 9%, 10%, same thing. So we've looked at this before, haven't we? These headings, they run from H1 to your heading, your H2 for your subheading, your H3 for your subheadings, your H4 for your subheadings. And remember when we looked at CSS, how we could change the size of our text? I hopefully lovingly fussed at you that you want to pick these heading numbers based on where they sit in a hierarchy, not size, because we can change the size in CSS later. And let's go ahead and look at an example of how we might do this. So I'm just going to go ahead and start. Let's move this way down. Yeah, we did this ages ago, didn't we? So I'm going to use an example. So let's say I have a web page about types of cats. And then for H2, these are my subheadings. Oh, heck. I've actually write them to make them work. I might say cats with fur. It is absolutely about where it sits in the hierarchy. It's not about the size. Oh, 'cause you are absolutely fantastic. I love how chatty and joyful you are. So let's say, so we've gone ahead and said, hey, we've got a website about types of cats. And we're going to talk about both cats with fur and cats with no fur. Ooh. And under our cats with fur, we might say, well, we've got more than one type of cat with fur. I say cats with long fur. Cats with fur. And maybe there's a subheading. I say, well, you know what? Under cats with fur, I want to talk about orange cats with long fur. Ah, so it's not about the size, it's that the big main idea of this page is types of cats. The sub idea is cats with fur or cats without fur. And then under here we say, oh, you know what? Cats with long fur come under cats with fur. And cats with orange fur, orange long fur, come under that. So it's really about sitting in the hierarchy. And sorry, I've just talked about cats forever, some nonsense. And here we've got some problems. And I've just lovingly fussed about, oh gosh, make sure that you don't jump around, that you don't just use these for sizes. But our main idea is how to become a ninja. All right, very specific but useful. And then we've got some subheadings. So learning the art of moving stealthily, so being quiet. And here we've got the art of battle is an H2 as well. And here we've got learn the art of living with honor. But for all of these, we jump from H2, a subheading, all the way down to H5. And that's not good semantic HTML. And this idea of semantic HTML, we're going to talk about this a lot. Semantic is just something that carries meaning. So when I say, hey, we're writing good semantic HTML, it means we're writing HTML that carries as specific a meaning and correct as a meaning as we can. And we'll learn more and more about this as we go. But here, this shouldn't be an H5, this should be an H3. How to hide in plain sight is part of how to move quietly. Okay, and the same here. How to climb a wall should be H3 because it's under this H2. All right, let's go ahead and take a deep breath and scroll down. Woof. And we've got the same thing here. We've got the H2, we've got the subheading, learn the art of battle. But then we jump to an H5. And we know that's not what we're supposed to do. It's a subheading of that H2. So let's change that. And the exact same here. Let's change that to an H3 because we know we shouldn't jump from an H2 to an H5. That's quite weird. Take a deep breath and we're going to scroll the rest of the way down. Oh, that's not even that far, is it? We've got another H2 to H5 jump, and this feels like muscle memory by now, doesn't it? We say, well, let's do these as H3s. That's chill. We're going to do another big scroll as we come down to run the tests. Everything's fine and everything's going to be fine. So, we've been talking a little bit about semantic HTML, and we're going to learn some elements that carry a lot of this meaning. And this can be really, really useful for folks using assistive technology, but it's also useful for robots. So the bots from maybe search engines who want to come scan your page. And we've looked at the main element before. So we looked at it in a bunch of examples, but this is the first time it's explicitly asking us to say, hey team, we need a main element here. So HTML5 included a lot of, and do you know what? In the class yesterday, I said, oh, HTML5 came out a couple years ago. And I looked that up. It came out 13 years ago, but more than just a year or two, eh? But it gives us a lot of they're 13 years old, new tags that carry a lot of this semantic meaning that we're talking about. Main, when you use the main link, that's really talking about like, hey, what's the main point of this web page? What's the main content that we're looking at here? So here, our header, well, this is where we have the sort of stuff like our titles and all that, not our web page title, but our headers. And here, oh heck, I'm gonna go ahead. I'm ready to spell everything wrong. You know what? It's not us. It's us when we do it right. It's me when I do it wrong, isn't it? We've got the main, and what we're going to put in here in the middle is all of the important parts of this website, all the things we think users might actually care about. Our articles and our pictures and our video. Ooh, our audio. We'll learn about that in a second. And before we did this, we've also got divs. We use divs a lot in CSS, and it is technically possible to use a div instead of header. And I see a lot of people do this, or a div instead of main, or a div. It's possible to use divs instead of these much more specific things like main, header, footer, nav, article, and section. But we're not going to do that. Div doesn't carry that extra semantic information. We're saying, hey, this is the header, this is the main area, and this is the footer, does carry that extra meaning that div just doesn't give us. Let's go ahead and scroll all the way down. We're going to run our tests, and we are on fire. I'm going to zoom out just a hair and cough directly into the mic because I'm a monster. And here, we've got the example of what I talked about. So it doesn't make you a bad developer, but it's not the nicest way to do things. A lot of folks do just go ahead and make a bunch of divs, so make a bunch of those empty rectangles and put any old kind of content in that. But you're never going to do that because you're a fantastic web developer and you care passionately about writing really good semantic HTML. You want to carry as much meaning as you can for your users, especially to make sure that this is accessible for your users. An article is one of these new HTML elements. And articles saying, hey, you know what to expect from what's coming next? You can expect an article. I got you. So here we've got a div, and we are just going to, in a very laid back way, turn that into an article instead. And the next time we write an article on this web page, we're going to make sure it's an article right from the start. Oh, this other one, already article, nice and safe. We'd come on down. Everything's chill. Look how fast this is going. Y'all better do something really, really mellow with the extra time we'll get back today. Oh, so header's important too. Earlier, we took a look at main, And we talked about how all of the important stuff on our web page is going to go in here. All the stuff we think our users really care about. But header, so sort of this where this H1 sits. Oh, Kai's asking, hey, should we add multiple articles on one page? Which is a really good. Can we? You absolutely can. And whether or not you should really depends on the style of the page. If it's like a really, really long blog post, I might just put one on each page because they're very long, but it is your own personal style. It is what makes you happy. Um, but yeah, if you've got a bunch of little articles, throw them up there. No one is the boss. I mean, I'm not the boss of you. I hope no one is the boss of you. That's a really good question. I appreciate it. It's always weird when my answer to deep technical questions is, "Oh yeah, just do what's in your heart." Oh, Olga's is asking what the difference between section and article is. And if you hold on just 1 second, I bet money, well, not real money, I bet it's going to come up in just the next section. It's a really, really good question. I appreciate it. Yeah, we'll get right to this. But for now, we see that someone's done this really understandable kind of lazy thing where they said, I'm just going to make things a bunch of divs. And we said, no, 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 babe. No, no, no. This should be your header. Let's go ahead and change that to your header. And just because that's going to carry more semantic meaning, it's going to carry more contextual meaning. And just having that as a little div, won't it? Yeah. So long blogs can still have multiple articles. So sections, we'll talk about this in a August, you've absolutely got that. Ooh, look at you. An article is for standalone content, and section is for grouping thematically related content. So like different parts of a recipe or different parts of some technical instruction. Oh, hey, it's super okay to lurk. You're such a sweetheart. There's no obligation to be chatty. I don't know what super clutch means, though. I'm very old. I hope it's good. So yeah, let's go ahead and look at this together. We're going to do nav, and then we're going to talk about section in just a second. But Kai was asking, hey, so long blog posts, we can have multiple articles? Yeah, totally. You can have multiple articles on the page. It's not going to hurt anybody. I like to put, and this is just me, this is just a style thing. I like to put blog posts maybe on different little pages, just because I'm a lazy reader, and I assume other people are, and I assume, oh, you're just going to read this one and then you're done. But there's nothing keeping you from putting multiple articles on the same page or multiple sections. Even those sections and articles, we're not going to mix those up. We're going to learn about those in just a minute. Everything is super chill. But, and this is going to feel really similar again, isn't it? We've got a section here, which we think is going to be navigation. This is where I can navigate. Oh, hang on. Should we use a section or article instead of it? Oh, this is the best question. I love this. And I love it because I get to be mean to you all again. Whenever possible, you should use the most specific element you can. So if you have an article, so if you're writing an article and you've got the choice, oh, I could use a div or I could use an article. Article is more specific. It carries more meaning. So I want you to use that one. If you say, oh, I've got this little section of text, I could use section or I could use div. I said, section is more specific. Use that. So Bruce, when he came and spoke to us maybe 3 weeks ago as a guest speaker, what did he say? He said, built in beats bold on bigly. So there are ways you could add extra context clues to a div and say, oh, this div's ID is article or ID is cool blog post to give a little bit more context. But really, the built-in solution is the more specific element, which is just saying, hey, I'm going to use article. So anytime you have a choice, use the most specific one you can find. Here we've got a navigation section. And we're getting told, oh, we've got an element for that. The nav element makes it easy, especially easy for folks using screen readers to find the navigation options. Here, we've got our navigation sections been done inside a div. And we absolutely know what to do by now. We say, you know what, this div is great, but it's not as specific as saying nav. So we're going to bring a beautiful level of specificity to this. And it's fine. Everything continues to be fine. The exact same thing again. We say, oh, you know what? We've got a footer down here that says copyright 2018 can't forget. Let's take a deep breath and go, whoop, whoop, all the way to the bottom. So the nav tag, Jonathan, this is such a good question. The nav tag can navigate to two sections of the page. We learned about linking to different sections of the page when we studied HTML, didn't we? But it can also link to different pages in the same website. Or really, there's nothing stopping you from saying, hey, here's the nav, visit our sister site or visit our German site. So you could link to other websites if you really wanted to. I think I would probably use nav mostly for navigating within this website. But technically, there's nothing stopping you from making an external link in there if you've got a really good reason, if it makes sense. So yeah, whenever you're like, oh, could I do this thing? I say, okay, cool. So use as much semantic HTML, make sure it carries as much meaning as possible. But then stop and think, does this make sense for a user? Is this reasonable? Would this be weird? And there's some times where you can absolutely get weird. You say, oh, I want this website to be pink and green. I say, okay, well, as long as your contrast is good, get weird. Oh, so is there a reader we can use to test our HTML? This is such a good question. Incredibly counterintuitively, a lot of screen readers are very, very expensive. Isn't that terrible? I know there are some testers, but I don't have a really good answer for this. Teddy, if you're going to be around for the guest session tomorrow, could I ask you to take a little bit of a note and ask this again tomorrow? Because I think Parham would be really good at this. I bet he's got some great answers. But if you're not around tomorrow, I can make a note too and make sure I ask. It's such a good question. I bet there are some tools, and I don't know them. We could go and have a search, but it occurs to me that in this case, saying, oh gosh, let's bring this right to the expert is going to be the most useful way to do this, isn't it? So we've already said, oh, I'm sorry, I'm just pulling you all up and down this code. We've already said that our header should be a header instead of, where are we? That our header should be a header instead of a div. We said our nav should be nav instead of a div. And way down here, we've got a footer, but this footer is a div. We say, okay. Well, what this div is actually doing is it's our footer. I'm going to change it to footer so we've got more semantic meaning carried here. It still looks just the same. But for somebody using a screen reader, they can say, oh, that's the footer. Just ignore it unless I need it. Ah. Oh, 7. No worries anyway. I'll go ahead. I hope I'm not holding everybody up. I'm going to take a pen. Isn't that old fashioned? And I'm going to tip everything onto the floor. And I'm going to make a note to ask this question for you, if that's okay. Oof, it's October. Are you all enjoying spooky season? The question was, what tools, readers, can we use to test? Oh gosh, are we 76% of the way through the year? I confess that I'm going to be pretty excited to see the backside of 2021. Fab, I've written that down so that exists, and my fragile human brain will not prevent me from asking that tomorrow. And the really cool thing, no pressure, but for those of you who can make it. Parham's really excited to answer any of your questions about screen readers or about accessible experiences, or even like, what is it like being a blind developer, a blind user of the web? And what can we do to make things easier for you? I hope we've got these kinds of questions. So We had a question earlier, or maybe a question yesterday about like, ooh, what does a screen reader sound like? And this is going to let us know what a screen reader sounds like. And it's going to teach us how to do audio controls. And with audio, we want to go ahead and so there's an audio tag that says, hey, this lets a website know, and this lets a browser know that what's going on is this is audio content. And this might be really useful, especially for folks who aren't able to access that audio content. So there's And there, the audio tag supports a controls attribute. And for the controls attribute, you don't need to say anything. You just say controls, and it automatically does a cool thing. Here's an example. Let's go ahead and copy these controls. And we're just going to take a look at these. And look, we've got this whole little player. It's just built in, and it looks fantastic. What happens if I get rid of controls? So the audio clip is still there, but we don't get this good little player that we've got here. And let's really look at, because this is a brand new element. So we've got audio, we've got an ID. Okay, cool. We like the IDs. We like using IDs. Meow clip. I imagine this is probably a meow. And here the controls give us that little control panel, which is pretty rad. And then we have to import a source. Here we've got the source. And this source here, yeah, it looks a little bit like we do for images, right? And we say audio meow3.mpg. And we also set the type that this is an MPEG. Somebody helpfully noted yesterday that audio supports OGG and MPEGs and WAV, and it does not support MIDIs. But unless you're very old, like I am, you're a lot less worried about MIDIs, aren't you? That we put them on websites back in the 90s. They made do you want, listen to me being an old woman telling you, oh, the websites back in the day. But do you want me to tell you something terrible about websites back in the 90s? Is we used to love, so is ID necessary for this, Kai's asking? And this is a good time to interrupt my boring old lady story. I think you're almost always going to want to have an ID here just to keep track of that. I think so. HTML is pretty fault tolerant, and CSS is as well, which means even if you do something a little bit weird, it'll usually sometimes work. I think it'll probably work without the ID, but I'm going to encourage you to put an ID in. It's best practices. It lets you keep that good track of what's what. And it's just really useful for keeping track of what that audio clip is. So probably not completely necessary, but we're going to put them anyway because we're solid. But websites back in the day, back in the late 90s, which was a very dark time, wasn't it? We used to put MIDIs, so these little tiny bits of electronic music, very lightweight. And we used to put them on our website so they would autoplay. You would come to a website and it would play the theme of your favorite show, or it would play. It was terrible. So you would just go to a website and it would just automatically start playing little tinny music. Dreadful. Dreadful. August is asking, should I always put the nav inside a header element? I think that they're often there. They're usually there. But I'm not sure that that's a requirement. Let's search. Does nav need to be in header? Here's a Stack Overflow question. I haven't vetted this. This is the first time I'm seeing it as well. So many web designers put navigation in the header, but that's not a requirement. And some people argue that maybe having them separate is better for screen readers. Do you know what? I'm such a bully, but that might be a really, really good question for Parham as well to say, oh, how might you do this? Yeah, so both nav and header have the landmark feature Teddy's pointing out, but I don't think that'll still work outside of the header. It will, yeah. I think it will, yeah. But let's ask Parham tomorrow. I'm so sorry that I got someone much smarter than me to talk to you all tomorrow. So I'm just being lazy where I'm like, oh, let's go ask the proper smart teacher instead. So let's try and do this audio clip. And for those of you who are following along, you can actually hear this. This is going to really be Zerziak is a developer who learned with Free Code Camp. Um, and he, by all accounts, seems lovely. And this is a clip of his screen reader. So we're going to go ahead and add an audio element after the P. Oh, after. Heck. Almost got me. It'll include the controls attribute. And then the source tab would be this. Okay. So here we don't have an ID, which was a question that which one of my lovelies that August asked just a minute, do we have to have ID? And I suppose not. We've not been asked to put it here. We can if we want to, if we want to be super good. We've got audio. Let's put an IG just to be at the top of the class. We're going to call that screen reader, just so we remember what this is. We've been asked to include the controls. Oh, without the file, it says, hey, I know what you want. You're going to put an audio file in here because you've said audio. And I know you're going to want your controls because you've said your controls. I'm going to go ahead and put those out for you. I got you. I got your back. And then we want our source to be src. src. Look at me just consistently spelling things wrong. And then we're also going to have a type associated with that. I'm going to come down and copy and paste. And here, so I'm going to copy and paste that. And then our type is going to be audio. Oh, audio MPEG. Oh, look at that. Wait, can you all hear if I play this? I'm not sure. I have no idea whether or not you all could hear that. You'll have to let me know. But that sounded super fast if you can hear that or if you're hearing it on your own site. Just to take a look at what we've done here is we've got our audio. We set that. We've got our ID as screen reader. Oh, yeah, you can hear it, but not it sounds super fast, doesn't it? Yeah. And we've even got a note here that says, hey, you know what? This audio clip sounds fast. And it can be difficult for folks who don't use this to understand. But this is a normal speed for screen reader users. They say, oh, hey, this is how we navigate the web. Can you imagine trying to read a website or sort of ingest a website and the whole thing was being read to you as slowly as I talk? Ugh, it would take you forever. So now you've got a nice quick whoop of what's going on. Can you put the src in the audio tag? I don't think we can. I don't think that's going to work. But whenever we're not sure, we'll try it. Oh, you know what? I just told you that wasn't going to work. And you know what? It absolutely does work. Yep. Kobe Kabe, you were right and I was wrong, but that's not sort of the official proper way to write HTML. So we're going to do these as separate just because that's the coding convention, just because that's the way we're going to hold on to those. Are we feeling okay? Oh, heck. Oh, yes, of course. Look how rubbish I am. Our audio tag has a closing element. That's fine. I am absolutely shameless for forgetting to close my tag. And it says only 5% complete. That's just because we went away and came back. It's all right. So you could technically do it, but don't do it just because it's not a neat coding convention. I say having the messiest code ever. So we're going to learn a little bit about charts and figures. Then I think we're probably going to learn a little bit about forms because forms seem like they could be really messy with assistive technology, don't they? So here, remember we talked about specificity with Semantic HTML, that you always want to be as specific as possible. If there's a real specific way to say something with HTML, that's the way we're going to say it. Yeah. So you can say, hey, here's an image. And that's quite a bit of information. But HTML5 introduced the figure element. And the figure element is saying, hey, this is a chart or a graph or diagram. And this is something where we can go ahead and add a caption as well. We think this is really useful. And that gives even more information than saying, hey, this is just a picture. So the figure element, which we've got here, is being combined with image. So it's still an actual image, but it's being wrapped in this figure tag, and then fig caption sits inside it. Ooh. A question on the fig caption with regards to the tribute page project. How come we weren't asked to use the fig caption syntax, but divs with IDs instead? This is a very good question, and I have no idea. So possibly this is just because they decided to set that up that way. Yes, I'm sorry. Maybe they wanted to test and make sure you can use divs correctly and IDs correctly. But yep, I'm afraid that I did not make the challenge, and this is the one they decided to go with. Sorry, that's usually I'm like, oh, it's a philosophical decision, or here I'm just like, no, don't know. It is a mystery for the ages. Where is my weird little brain? So we're going to change the div tag here. Where's that? You're telling me to find a div tag. Where are you? Oh, look, they don't want us to mess about. So they want me to change this div to a figure. Okay. And then I think where we end this div, that's going to be a closing figure as well. No, it's a really good question. I really appreciate you asking. Oh, Fabio is saying if you use fig caption, it'll still accept it. I love that y'all were already like testing this out. So we've turned that into figure, and now it's asking us to change this P into a fig caption. Oh, and even before we change the closing one, we've got this really pretty formatting. And this seems a little weird to say, oh, hey, we've got an image, but no image, only the caption of an image. I said, these comments say we'll put the image in later. Oh, chill. We're going to run our tests. We're going to continue to be chill. And I'm going to make sure that, so I think we've got 2 or 3 more of these left. If you all have any questions, either about this or about the course more generally, I'm going to have so much time for those. I mean, I always have time for y'all. So we actually did this when we did our forms last time as well. So we're going to take a deep breath and come down. Whew, just a little. Oh, we've got a really good question saying, hey, how do we know which projects we can do early? And I'm going to be a meanie here and say, try all of the projects now. It's really good to start getting involved. So how do I know when I'm ready to try the projects? Let's try them now. I'm so mean to y'all. So here, the label tag wraps the text for a specific form control item. You say, what? I say, be cool, be cool, be cool. Here, label is associated with one choice. So here we've got a blank field, and it says label and then email to say, okay, this is going to be a question about email. And then we've got our form the way we'd expect to say the input type is text, so it's a text field. The ID is email, and the name is email. And you say, well, we're repeating these. And I say, yeah, we need both of these. And to make it worse, we're going to repeat ourselves again, I think. So a for attribute is going to go ahead and repeat what our ID is called and what our name is called, but it's going to do it up here in the label. And the reason that we're doing that is so that folks using assistive technologies like screen readers, hey, here's a form. And what this form is for, what this entry one is for, is going to be email. Oh, um, Jonathan's asking, is it better to use an input or a button for submit, or does it matter? Um, so the input type should probably be submit, but it can't. You can use a button, you can display it as a button, but what it's going to do is submit. So the input type is still going to be submit, I think. Is that conceptually weird? um, I'd probably say submit because it carries more semantic. If you say, oh, do I want to say input type button? I say, well, this is a submit. It's a submission. And it looks like a button here, doesn't it? So we've got the button styling. I think submit here carries a bit more semantic meaning, doesn't it? But I bet you could get away with making it a button and just say input type. What happens when I say input type button? Yeah, it looks and acts the same, doesn't it? But submit just carries that much more meaning for us, doesn't it? So we've added our for field to say, hey, if you're using assistive technology, I just want to give you a heads up that this field is about email. And that seems pretty chill. So the for field is going to be the same as the ID, which is going to be the same as the name. Yeah. It seems weird to do it 3 times, but we want to tell ourselves for the future, which is the name. We want to tell the computer, which is the ID. And we want to tell our users who we care very much about, who might be using assistive technology, which is for. We're going to run our tests. And we're going to do one more, and then we're going to be done. We have zipped through this today, and I'm going to be super happy to answer any of your questions. Y'all can go ahead and start throwing questions in anytime you want. You're not going to distract me. I mean, you might, but it'll be fun. So the label with the for ties the ID of the corresponding item, like we just learned about. Since radio buttons often come in a group, it's even more important to give screen reader users an idea of what the group question is, and then make sure we've got the information for all of the individual points. Oh, Kai points out, you know what? We can combine these. You say, we can use a button with submit because we can style the button. Yeah. You can get weird if you want. I mean, that doesn't even feel especially dangerously weird. So we're going to find, so the field set wrapper and the legend tag. So field set surrounds the group of radio buttons. And the legend tag says, hey, this is what this group is about. But you don't have to use these when the choices are self-explanatory, like gender. Male, female, know that. You know what? I really don't like radio buttons for gender. I confess I don't like asking gender at all when I can get away with it. But this feels like it's a text field, isn't it? Like gender is complicated and squishy. I like giving people a lot of different options that radio buttons don't really feel like they do. And here we've got a good example. We've got a form starting. We've got this field set to say, hey, I'm going to set the field, right? And here we've got our legend. And the legend says, choose one of these 3 items. And that's a really good one where we say, hey, this is what this question's about. This is what this group of options is about. We're going to take a deep breath. Come not all the way down. I'm rubbish. Here, I bet we're going to change the div to a field set. All right, they've overused div again. That happens. And change that to a field set. And where's that other div, please? Teddy Bear is suggesting that love computer, hate computer might be the 2 genders. I got a lot of both going on right now, so I might again continually push against the number of prescribed genders, even in jest. I love hate computer. So we've got our field set changed. We're going to come up and we're going to change the P tag. So here it says, what level ninja are you? And that's just a P tag at the moment, but we want to change that to a legend because the legend is a much more specific HTML tag. And that's going to give our screen reader users the idea, the indication, hey, this is what this group of radio buttons is about. This is the question associated with them. And that's it for today. Wasn't that fast? And this is especially fast in part, I confess, because I wanted to have two different speakers come and talk to us about accessibility. So we're going to have Parham come tomorrow and talk to us about accessibility. And then we're going to have Ashley come and talk to us next week. Ashley's brilliant. She's so smart and interesting. And she's going to be talking to us about accessible writing. And I think that's really valuable. I think we often don't talk about that. So how do we make our writing easy and clear and accessible for folks from different cognitive levels, folks from different language backgrounds, or make it really readable for folks who are tired, which that's always me. Do you all have any questions I can help you with today? Yeah. Oh gosh, do you know what? My beautiful assistant's pointing out that I did a thing with the other class that I didn't do with you. Not because I have favorites, but because somebody asked a good question. So in the last class, somebody asked, well, let's go way, way back to the dim mists of time, to an hour ago. Do. Sorry, I'm just consistently scrolling you all around. Ooh, how is this different from aria roles? Ooh, so aria roles are a lot more specific. Now let's take a look at these. Let me go ahead and share this with the class. Look at what an incredibly good, incredibly specific question. So, hey, what's the deal with aria roles? What? Oh gosh, I've given you the wrong one. Sorry. I've given you I've given you a wrong one. That's wait. Yes, aria. So, aria enhancements are attributes that give you extra ways to define what's going on a page that makes things more accessible. And really, I think the difference between these semantic HTML elements and aria is that you want to be using these semantic HTML elements anyway. So if you've got a div that's really an article wrapped in div, you want to use article. And then aria sits on top of that, giving you even more. Oh, let's make this a little bit bigger, even more information about what's going on. So aria can be especially useful when you're using a lot of JavaScript or using some JavaScript. But ha 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 ha, look at this yellow box. I'm gonna make it huge. I'm gonna really oof, that's dizzying. That's horrifying, isn't it? Well, many of these widgets were later incorporated into HTML5. But, and this isn't just me fussing at you, this is MDN fussing at you, but developers should prefer using correct semantic HTML element over using aria if such an element exists. So, aria are, and if you've not heard of them yet, don't worry about it. These are some widgets, these are some little built-on modules that can make things a bit more accessible. We'll talk about them when we come into talking about, if we come into talking about JavaScript. But they're not intended to replace semantic HTML. So if you want to get into exploring aria, this is to supplement, this is adding on to semantic HTML. And Lewis, this is such a fantastic question. I really appreciate it. One other thing I was going to show you all, because someone asked, oh, you just get to watch me bumble about the web. Don't you love that? When we came to, go away, CSS. Woof. When we were talking in yesterday's class about alt texts, somebody zeroed in on this and said, hey, Jess, according to HTML5, having an alt text is mandatory now. Why doesn't it break when I don't use alt text? And this was such a good question. You all ask good questions too. I bring your questions back to the Monday class. Don't worry. And this was a really exciting question because I got to talk a little bit about backwards compatibility. And this is one of the really core concepts of the web. So the people who make the rules for HTML are the people at the W3C, the World Wide Web Consortium. Woof, a lot to say. And one of their core tenets is, well, when we make something new for HTML, it shouldn't break old websites. And that's really, really true. And I want to show you a website. Oh, heck. See if I can find it. Fabulous. I want to show you a website from 1996. So this is the website that was originally made for the old Space Jam movie. This was made in 1996, and everything works. They've changed, I confess, they've changed it a little bit. And you say, Jess, how can you tell they changed it? And I said, do you know we can spy on websites? So here we've got the old Space Jam. And I confess that this was very modern for the time because this is one big image, but all of the different planets are sectioned into different links. Look at that. This was high tech web development back in the day. The 90s were a dark time. But we can see, and not just for this old fashioned website, but for most websites, by right clicking and say view source, we can take a look at how they made this website. And somebody helpfully pointed out to say, oh, you know, they've made a couple changes because, well, let's make this bigger. Can you all see? So this is a bazillion-year-old website. This is a website from when I was first learning how to drive. Oh no, how many of you were alive in 1996? This is like looking at my own death. And the first, so we've got our, so the person who built this wouldn't have put any CSS back in 1996. Back in 1996, it was a dark time. I don't think we had CSS at all. Somebody came in later and added a couple of bits of CSS here after the fact. Teddy's asking, oh, is that second line? And these two lines where it says copyright and then bada bing, bada boom, note that both of these are comments. So we couldn't see these unless we were looking at the source. Teddy, sweetheart, I know this is going to make me feel ancient, but Sopranos did not exist in 1996. It wasn't a thing. And Olga's is saying, okay, Jess, you old people, if you didn't have CSS, and you're such a sweetie, you don't say you old people, how did you style the site if you didn't have CSS? Such a good point. So we just had attributes in HTML that we would add. So you would say background color equals pink or equals a hex code. None of this fancy CSS. And you could change, it felt a little bit like inline CSS does now, but it was just using the attributes of HTML to style. That's why all websites from the late 90s look kind of ugly. But they all look a little bit the same. So let's take a look at this ancient website where people have, after the fact, brought in a couple changes. So here we've got our two comments, copyright 1996, bada bing, bada boom, which I imagine is also a Sopranos reference. I haven't watched it either, but this is pre-Sopranos. This may be where Sopranos got it. We've got our head element, which is different from header. This is a very old one. This existed back in the day. And this part, the stylings, these are new. So they would have brought this in after the fact. So they say, we're going to link to the CSS in the head, but here's our title. Okay. And notice that head and header are different. So head is going to be what you're linking to, and for style sheets, it's going to be your title. It's going to be importing any fonts you need. And look at this, look at this. This is kind of what stuff looked like back in the day. So body BG color equals, this is way less cute than CSS, isn't it? Look how clunky this is. So we've got a head and we've got a body with no main. Did anything replace the head tag? It didn't. So we're still using the head tag. We just haven't expressly learned about it yet. So we're still using the head tag, and it'll contain things like your title, your links to style sheets, your links to fonts. So head still exists. We just brought in header. to sit under it. Here we've got our styling sitting in the body tag because the 90s were dark. And then we center stuff. Look at this. Look at this. This is the true purpose of all comments, isn't it? So this is somebody who's talking to another developer where they say, hey, this is where the ads for the site are. Don't you dare touch any of this code. It will break anything. But we don't see the ads, do we? It looks like they took those ads away. I mean, I imagine ads have changed in the net. In the last 25 plus years. Woof. Woof. Oh no. How long ago was this? Woof. Oh, this was actually 25 years ago. I have to think about my own death. You all will say nice things when I finally die. Here we've got no break, so don't give us a break. Woo. And oh, do you know what? This HTML is terrible. And somebody pointed out yesterday that this was so dark. And this is bad. Don't learn anything from me. I'm just showing you the way things used to be. Here we've got a table. Because back in the day, we didn't have CSS to grid things out. I know, isn't it so messy? So we used to use tables and square things up. And you should not do them these days because that's a terrible way to do HTML. It's so messy. It'll make your day better. Better? Worse, so much worse. Here we've got another. And this is just sort of a conceptual break to say, oh, hey, this is a different section of the website. More tables. Don't use tables. You don't want tables. Here we've got a video. Yeah. So this is really cool to see. Oh, Kai's asking, are tables not used now? So tables have largely fallen out of fashion. It is still possible to use tables for some things in HTML, but almost always where you would use a table for layout, you're going to use CSS these days. If you look at websites from the late 90s, we used tables for everything. It was such a mess. It was the only way we could get stuff done. So we used a lot of tables and a lot of iframes. We didn't really have sort of the vibe that, oh, HTML is going to make these neat and tidy rectangles for us. And CSS didn't exist to help us format our boxes. So we were drawing literal boxes. There were no divs. I'm just yelling at you precious children about like, oh, back in my day. But yeah, so you can right click on whatever you want and take a look at them. Oh, of course, you can use a table for actual tables. Yeah, if you've got an actual table you need to display, please, please, please use a table. It'll make so much sense. Yep, Jonathan's right as well. So I've got Catherine, Kai, and Jonathan all in unison saying the exact correct thing. So saying, can I still use a table for when I want to display? Yes, absolutely. I don't mean to say never, never tables, but don't use tables to create things like this, please. It may sort of technically work, but it'll be a mess and I will cry. Actually, you'll cry if you're trying to build this in tables. They're so messy. But yeah, this is what the world was like back in the late 90s. Very bright colors. This was the pinnacle. That's not true. This and Hamster Dance were the pinnacle of web design. And everything was a little bit messy to make. Do you all have any questions either about what things were like 25 years ago, back in my day? Sitemap. Let's look at the sitemap. Yeah. Look at this. Look at this really lovely. Here's what the different options are. Here's a lot of information about it. And here are the different navigation options for all of these. I really like the sitemap as an example. Sitemaps overall are rad. Here's all the information from the site mapped out. But this one's especially good. Yeah. Oh, let me go ahead and give you this website in the chat just in case y'all want to see what the dark days were like. Yeah, does anybody else have any questions I can help you with? Sorry to scare you about never use tables, but like never use tables mostly. Yeah. If there's no, oh, while I'm waiting to see if there are any more questions, let's talk homework. Oh, are frames used now? What an incredibly good question. Look, you must have been a really, really much beloved student because I was just about to say, so your homework. And you're like, I've got a question. Nice timing. Iframes are used now. Frames back in the 90s used to be explicit. So they would, it was so bad. It was so bad. We used to have, you'd usually have along the right side of your page, your nav would be sort of a column, like a table of content for book that sat in an iframe, was a common web design convention. And that doesn't exist anymore. I mean, you could technically do it, but it would be janky. Iframes are used now for things like embeds. So embedding a YouTube video. And you can do that by going to the YouTube video you're interested in. Let's go. Yeah. Central. Oh, how distressing. You want to embed ourselves? Like this is, we're live right now. That's actively distressing. How about let's go ahead and embed yesterday's? Oh, heck. So here's me again. Very weird. Very weird. And if we wanted to push share and embed, it's going to give us code in an iframe. So iframes still exist. Iframes sort of create another browser instance these days for this embedded content, stuff like maps. And Teddy's got it. Inception frame is really the way to think about it these days. It's like, hey, I'm going to put a instance of this browser in your browser. Weird, huh? And that would let you sit, just because YouTube is weird to link to, they ask you to do it with iframe. So we can do that. Yeah. Oh, you saw somebody, I saw someone use one with, make one with a scroll bar. Yeah, totally possible. Frames, again, back in the 90s, my fear of them is like my fear of tables. We overused them. It wasn't cute. It was bad. Hopefully I've distilled it to you from like, oh, I saw a lot back in the day. It's bad. Fabulous. If there are no other questions, let's talk homework. Could you go ahead and, it's a really, really short session for accessibility. Please try and get at least all the way through the accessibility course before next week. If you've got the time, so if you're already caught up, this could be a great time to move ahead a little bit, get a little bit ahead of the class. Maybe maybe try out some of the projects would be a really good way to try this. But yeah, this week and next week are going to be light on the homework. Oh, oh, Catherine, that's such a good question. It's super, yeah, of course. You can share those, you can share the courses. The whole point of putting these on YouTube is anybody who wants to can have a look. It's for you. Yeah. We make these open intentionally. So we don't want them behind a password wall. And people don't have to sign up for the boot camp to look at stuff, of course. Oh, you're such a sweetheart. So, your homework, at least through, if you get a chance, if you're behind a little bit, this is a great time to catch up. But if you can, try and get at least all the way through accessibility. If you can go ahead and do a little bit more, it'll make next week way easier. How about I go ahead and your other homework, you know what your other homework is. Please make sure that the rest of your day is as chill as possible. So please, if it's morning, have a relaxing rest of your day. If it's the afternoon, yeah, have the chillest afternoon you can. But if it's the evening, if you're about to go to bed, try and have a really easy day tomorrow to make up for it. I'm going to go ahead and let all of you go. I'll see many of you tomorrow for the session with Parham, but no pressure if you can't make it live. I hope you all have the easiest possible rest of your day or tomorrow as part of your homework. And I'll see you all soon. Thank you so much.